Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Why Community Matters webinar series. This is Judy Gordon. I'm the VP of Marketing for OmniSparks and your host for today's webinar. Today, we are joined by Simona Pop from the Bounties Network. Hi, Simona. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Hello.
And Joe from the Chicago Blockchain Project. Hi, Joe.
Yes.
Before we get started, I just want to let you know about the sponsors. OmniSparks and the Chicago Blockchain Project are bringing you this webinar series. OmniSparks is the premier collaboration platform for crypto organizations to create and share value within their communities. For more information, visit omnisparks.io. And the Chicago Blockchain Project is building an infrastructure for the city of Chicago, connecting builders with resources and investors. So today, as I said, we have Simona from the Bounties Network. And Simona, go ahead and introduce yourself and let's get started.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Judy. And hi, everyone. My name is Simona, and I am one of the co-founders of the Bounties Network. Now, just to set the scene, we created the Standard Bounties Protocol back in 2017 and went live on mainnet with our Explorer at the end of 2017. So we've been roughly live in one of the few live dApps out there since 2017. And so what I want to chat to you about is the real world applications of blockchain, and certainly the real world applications of what we've been doing through Bounties. As most of you know, Bounties, the bounty as a format is essentially a task that you fulfill and you get a reward when you fulfill the task. Obviously, because we are built on the Ethereum blockchain, the rewards are in crypto and they are in ETH or any ERC20 token. So we have many bounties in DAI, certain community tokens as well, SNTs, the status token, and many more. And so without further ado, this is one of the main drivers behind what we do. And it was something that Vitalik said, change the incentives, change the world. And we really do believe in the power of incentives to mobilize and organize global action. Now, the reason why I say global action is because you can have a lot of different initiatives happening, let's say, in the developed world, but when you go into countries that don't necessarily have the economic opportunities that may be available in the States or Western Europe, you do begin to realize the power of the incentive, even if it is an extrinsic incentive to begin with, that then becomes an intrinsic motivation. And so, again, just restating that and the power that that incentives can have. And again, just going through the bounty as a format, like I say, a reward offered by an individual or an organization to accomplish a specific task. Now, when people think of bounties, particularly in our blockchain space, we tend to think of bugs or tend to think of code bounties. So very, very developer-oriented tasks, very, very technical. But what we started discovering throughout 2018 is that the bounty as a format can be applied to a number of different verticals. It's a very, very flexible format for incentivizing and organizing action. So we started seeing a lot of different applications of the bounty to the point where we had research bounties. In fact, the benchmarking report that was done comparing Ethereum to EOS was actually done through a bounty. You can have translations, you can have design, you can have art, you can have music, you can have content creation, and a whole host of different applications, and even things like social and environmental impact, because again, it is this very, very easily adaptable format. And so one of the main things that we realized very early on, as we've been testing a lot of assumptions that we had, let's say in 2017, and as we developed partnerships throughout the Ethereum ecosystem and beyond throughout 2018, is really that this concept of blind trust, it no longer needs to be the norm. Proof of action replaces it. And what I mean by proof of action is a lot of the times and a lot of the different use cases for outsourcing work or outsourcing a certain task completion would normally go through a series of trust mechanisms. You trust that people have the money to pay you for a piece of work. You trust that that particular organization is going to accept the work that you submit. With charitable organizations, we trust blindly so that they will do X, Y, Z, or whatever it is that they said with the money that I have given them, be it, $5, $10, and so on. So the main thing that we see is that actually this proof of action can be verified. We can create bounties that ask for verifiable proof of action, and that is what becomes the norm, and that is what becomes the kind of the fuel that makes the whole peer-to-peer economy or peer-to-peer transactions go. So just to take some of the key elements of what blockchain bounties can do is they can, you can collect global investments or global contributions to a particular project. A pilot that I'm going to mention in a bit that we actually ran in the Philippines and incentivized a ocean cleanup was actually funded by some global contributions, again, individuals, different projects, but it was a way of contributing to something without that worry of where will the funds go. A bounty pot can only ever go to the payouts for successful submissions. And that's incredibly transparent. The secure data, again, when you're talking about social impact and potentially vulnerable populations, that is again something that can be accessed incredibly quickly because, again, it doesn't live in a centralized database or a centralized geographically defined location. So those two things will make it increasingly important in terms of conservation efforts, in terms of, like I say, vulnerable populations, potentially even drug rehabilitation and things like that. Instant payments, this is a very, very powerful piece when it comes to incentivizing and mobilizing work and incentivizing action, because you can instantly get contributions from people all over the world without the worry that we typically have in terms of international payment fees, transfer fees, the fluctuations between exchange rates and so on that we see very, very often, particularly in terms of freelancing platforms that right now charge hefty fees for the users that then have to convert the money that they make from dollars into whatever local currency they use, and so on. So that becomes a lot quicker, a lot safer, and also a lot cheaper. And then long-term income streams, this is something that I will touch on, as I mentioned, in this particular example that I'm going to share with you. It becomes a way of exploring alternative means of income and alternative streams of income where, let's say, traditional jobs are no longer sustainable, or indeed full-time jobs become a little bit less common ground, and we have a lot of different alternatives that could potentially still ensure the thriving of a community when a traditional job may disappear due to a whole range of different factors. And so this essentially means that the onus comes back to the individual, and the ability and the potential that blockchain has to give the power back to the individuals and allow them to tap into and work on meaningful projects from wherever they are currently located, and being able to do so without the problems that we have in Web 2 right now. Also in terms of access from, let's say, less than privileged geographical locations as well. And so easy access is a big thing when it comes to global adoption and when it comes to global involvement, and not just by the very technically apt, let's say. And one of the main things that works really well with Bounties as that introductory step into our ecosystem and into applications on blockchains and into a new way of working, a new way of collaborating, a new way of transacting peer-to-peer is its simplicity. So we're simplifying dynamics drastically. And when you consider a bounty, you genuinely just have 3 steps. You have the bounty gets created, it gets fulfilled, and then there's a reward attached. It is an incredibly simple format. And like I say, it is why it's such a flexible format. And as a result of that, we can see, and we could see, this pattern of people wanting to access the bounties or access the platform on the go, which is something that we haven't really had in terms of other applications. Most of them, again, because they are geared towards developers, we see this predominantly desktop, this predominant desktop usability. But when we redesigned the Explorer back in September of last year, we very much made it fully responsive on mobile, because we did start seeing people wanting and demanding things. And also through the nature of the bounties, the tasks were asking for things like photos on site at a particular location, or videos, or certain the ability to share something right there and then, versus waiting until you get home to your desktop or open your laptop and so on. So again, when we redesigned it, we were very keen to make it to make the experience flow very neatly and very user centric, in a very user centric way via mobile. And so one of the things that you will notice when you go on the explorer.bounties.network is that you have a whole host of different verticals and bounties for a whole host of different tasks, so or deliverables. So you have design, you have referrals for jobs, you have interviews, research for data science. We've had people putting up bounties to create mashups of songs and remixes. We've had the artist RIC posted a bounty to get a violin part, a specific violin part for one of his songs. He created that through a bounty. And so we're seeing this very broad range of uses. Therefore, it becomes a lot more accessible to a broader audience, where I do not need to be a developer and I do not need to know the ins and outs of the blockchain technology, or what it is, what it does, why it's so incredibly beneficial. But I can just go and start working or start contributing to some of the more generalized bounties that then get me into the ecosystem. They get me set up with a wallet, already earning ETH, or again, NERC20. And I then start being part of building this ecosystem and of contributing to Web3. And because I mentioned it before, I want to give you a use case for bounties, and I picked this one because it's a very I guess very different use case than what you might be used to. So we created the Bounties for the Oceans in partnership with MakerDAO back in June last year. And we decided to launch it on World Ocean Day, but very much with the intention of it being a perpetual or a long-term bounty that isn't just there for one day, but it continues existing for a lot of people to get involved. And what it is, it's very simple. We are incentivizing people to go out and perform a cleanup wherever they are. It can be a beach, it can be a park, it can be their street, it can be a forest, wherever, and then submit proof that they have done so. This proof is a little bit of a Web 2, Web 3 kind of hybrid, where we're asking them to submit an image with a location filter, with a date filter, and then at the cleanup site with the trash that they have cleaned. We didn't know how this would be received, and we actually were blown away by not just the level of involvement and the geographical variety of locations that we were getting the bounties coming in from, the submissions coming in from, but also a lot of the people who fulfilled the bounty, it was their very first time doing anything on chain. It was their very first time completing a bounty or even creating a wallet or anything like that. So it became a very interesting way of onboarding them into Web3, but also obviously having this positive action on their environment and their community. And so we launched this. It went very, very well. We've had cleanups now from anywhere in the US, in the UK, Romania, Tasmania, and so on. And we decided then to create it at a bigger scale, to run a pilot that not only involved more people and was in a group setup, but also we also ran it in a developing country. The reason why we chose to do that is because I think so many people assume that we have, we can create a product or an application or a project somewhere in the US, for instance, and it will apply the same regardless of who uses it. But what we really discovered was that you have a whole host of different unique characteristics in each geography that you go to. For instance, in Manila, we had a lot of takeaways and a lot of learnings because it wasn't somewhere where internet is available. It isn't somewhere, at high speeds. It isn't somewhere that everybody has smartphones or everybody has data on those smartphones. And so the level of complexity, and also we discovered that the only wallet that was available to download in Manila was Trust Wallet. So you suddenly start looking at things from a different perspective, and the importance of building for real users and testing what you build with real users is just unparalleled. And so just speaking of the Manila pilot, we, in terms of environmental impact, we actually ran it across 2 days, and we only performed the cleanup about 2.5 hours per day because it became very, very hot very quickly. And the beach area, as you can maybe see from that photo, was quite exposed. So we very much wanted to basically make sure that people were comfortable whilst doing it. And so in that very short time, we managed to collect 3.3 tons of rubbish. That's the breakdown of the makeup of that rubbish. We had 220 people across the 2 days. And it really was an impressive thing to see in terms of the involvement and the enthusiasm of people for actually getting involved in something that not only was rewarding them for their efforts, but they were also doing it to ensure the health of their ecosystem, of their communities. Most of the people who turned up were coming from local communities and former fishermen communities that a lot of them had now started to potentially look at other means of income because fishing stocks are dwindling because of the rubbish situation. We actually have a documentary that we filmed whilst we were there, and we're hoping to release that in the next few months. We do have a trailer out, which I am happy to share. But what we essentially learned was that education is by far the most prominent issue that we faced. This is something that, you know, we get very, very used to in terms of people understanding or knowing what we're talking about when we speak of cryptocurrencies, when we speak of blockchain, when we even introduce this idea of a decentralized network and so on. But of course, a lot of the people in the audiences that we are trying to get on board will not have any idea of these terms, and you really need to break it down and express it through analogies, through parallels with whatever they might currently use in terms of technology and kind of trade mechanisms. Then crypto wallets, only 10% of the participants actually had working smartphones. The reason why I say working smartphones is because some of them were jailbroken and so could not download anything from an app store. And then the internet was incredibly slow. The data plans are not necessarily data plans. People buy data by the minute, which can be incredibly expensive, especially when you take into account that the internet is slow. Then you're asking them to download wallets and submit to Bounties. But what we managed to do was to actually hotspot a lot of them and manage to go through the full process with a lot of them, and quite a few are still fulfilling that same bounty and doing it quite regularly so that they continue earning, because the bounty is still live. People can still absolutely go on fulfilling it. And that was one of the main goals, to actually empower people, set them up with wallets. They now know the mechanism of fulfilling a bounty. So the idea was that they can absolutely continue to fulfill a bounty, to earn money, even though we are long gone and we don't need to physically be there, in fact. And that's another huge difference to what we have today. And so the main thing that essentially this creates is potentially a new means of income for communities. The community that we encountered in Manila Bay was and were, because there were people coming from a few different communities, but they were all based in the same area. There were traditionally fishermen communities. And of course, because the fish stocks are dwindling, people have to go further afield, further out to get the fish. Therefore, they spend less time fishing. Therefore, they make less money. And so what do you do when the rubbish problem doesn't go away? Therefore, the fish don't come back. The habitat continues to degrade. And so that traditional job that is fishing is no longer sustainable. You now have to find alternatives, and you now have to provide other means of income. And this is just one example, but you could have a whole host of different bounties set up for a whole host of different environmental tasks, for different community focused tasks, for just enabling or giving people that opportunity to tap into some resources and a global pool of work. In terms of what people can do, it's incredibly simple, and I think I do this all the time, and I think it's a very, very good way to get people involved. I have these 2 or 3 ongoing bounties that I mostly use to get people used to the mechanism. And so the Get Involved a bounty, which is essentially just synopsis and takeaways from blockchain events around the world. They can be physical events like meetups or conferences, or indeed workshops, webinars. And these takeaways, it can be a quote, it can be something you learned, it can be, I don't know, the fact that you found out that bounties can be used for social impact. And you go through the whole process of setting up a wallet and earning some crypto as well. And then these are some a few different links that are useful. Some of our projects, our Getting Started guide, which can be shared with anybody. It's incredibly simple, and it is designed to be. It's designed for broad access, so anybody should be able to set up either a MetaMask or a Brave browser on desktop, or a whole host of different mobile wallets that we integrate with and are featured in their DApp Explorers. So Status, now even the new Opera crypto wallet, Trust Wallet, like I said, Coinbase wallet. So there's plenty of opportunity to get involved. And so yes, that is pretty much it in a nutshell.
Okay, great. That's so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing those stories with us. So I have a couple of questions for you. So you talked about the music bounty you did with the violin, or the piece of the violin. How are you reaching out to people to get them to participate?
So one of the things that we found incredibly surprising to begin with, but obviously incredibly amazing at the end of the day, is that people tend to find the bounties that we didn't even know were necessarily, or people were necessarily in our community ready to pounce on a violin, piece or on a music bounty.
Yeah.
And we surprised all the time just by the sheer variety of people we are welcoming on a daily basis into our community. A lot of them, as we all know, in terms of community, a lot of community members like to observe and be quite silent, not necessarily reveal a lot about themselves. But of course, with things like bounties, or with an opportunity that arises that does match their skill set, they will be very quick to act on it. So again, this is one of the ways we discovered that we have a lot of different languages that are spoken in our community. It's also the way we discovered that we have a lot of talented artists in our community, and just it becomes that flow of how do you almost initiate or enable that first step into this new way of doing things, or this new way of monetizing your skill set and participating into the new peer-to-peer economies. So I think it's really wonderful to see people getting more and more interested in this space. And I think the reason why we have such broad use cases is because people are realizing that a lot more and more varied audiences are tapping in and are actually listening and are eager to participate.
So, and I love the story about the bounty program in the Philippines. That's just what a great project for every reason that you stated. How hard is it to get people involved, to download a wallet? Is that one of the things that you found globally can be a challenge? Yes.
Again, because we are so focused on this broad adoption and really this idea of leveling out the playing field in terms of access to information, in terms of access to resource, in terms of access to a global pool of work, it then becomes very clear that the apps that we have, or the wallets that we have, are not broadly available. And so you would then start seeing very, very, very clearly that actually there's a whole host of different hurdles that people have to jump through if they want to tap into it, if they come from I call them the non-traditional points of economic power or economic access. And so you're seeing things like I mentioned, the only wallet that was available was Trust Wallet. There are so many countries where Coinbase is not available. There are so many.
Sorry, just to go back, but why was Trust Wallet the only one available? Is it regulatory issues, or?
I honestly don't know. When we tested it through the App Store, it was the only one I could find.
Oh, well, Okay.
So, and that was with a Filipino phone, so on their network. I honestly do not know, but it was the only one. Thankfully, we tested it beforehand, before getting people on the ground, and at least we had that one. But what I am also seeing, however, is that the more we get these projects in different areas and geographies, the more the need for tools like that will become pressing, and some people are going to create them, right? So you almost have this, need create solutions. So I think the more we have this, and the more we involve other geographies, and the more we involve more people, more varied people and use cases, the more these solutions are going to appear, and people are going to build these solutions so that they can enable more and more people to tap into it. And I think, in terms of the UX flow, of course, the wallets and being able to submit to a bounty and needing gas and so on does complicate things and does lengthen things. This is the problem, because nowadays we're so used to everything being incredibly speedy and incredibly simple. Almost we do so many things automatically almost, right? We're so used to the flow of a Web 2 app that actually having to go through all of these hoops, where we feel a little bit annoyed of how are you asking me to do all of this before I can get to my prize? But it is something that is getting better and better. It's something that is, if you looked at the Bounties Explorer at the end of 2017, it looked very, very, very different to what it looks like now. We were not mobile responsive. We are now. We have most people fulfill bounties on mobile, and they also create them on mobile.
Oh, okay. That's interesting to know. Yeah. Did that surprise you?
I think it was just because people were waiting to be able to do it, and suddenly they like, whew, thank goodness for that. So yeah.
That's great. So when someone completes a bounty, like you were talking about the people in the Philippines, how does it get verified? How does the fulfillment get verified? Is there someone in your team that does that, or the person who sets up the bounty?
So it's the person who sets up the bounty.
Okay.
Right now, we do have this kind of human element of verification, because we want to be able to, number one, just make sure that the submissions are legitimate. Thankfully, we've had very, very few people trying to scam the system. One of the most prominent one was somebody submitting to the DAI bounties for the ocean cleanup, just submitting a photo of a beach from Google. I mean, it's just, so it's one of those things where it becomes clear that it doesn't match the requirements. Therefore, I was definitely never going to accept it. But we want that human element because, again, we have so many different bounties, and mostly with the creative bounties, you want somebody to be able to look at that piece of work, whether it's the violin piece, whether it's a blog post, whether it's a piece of video or some footage. You want somebody to look at it and say, this is great, or can you please tweak XYZ? We also have a very specific section in the Create a Bounty template where it says how many adjustments you expect. So you can set it straight from the get-go. There will be potentially 3 revisions and so on.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So it becomes very, very easy and very, very clear. And I think that's one of the main things that we have in terms of bounties, but also in terms of what blockchain gives you. It's a lot of clarity and a lot of the usual opaqueness that you have with so many Web 2 situations that just gets removed. So so we wanted to keep that in there, and also because you get a notification. So now, because we have the redesign of the platform, you get a notification on the platform. You also get a notification via email. So you constantly, you can keep on top of things and make sure that you accept the bounties as they come in. And we also advise people to, and we have these conversations and have had these conversations with a lot of the projects in our space, to make it very clear again, whether it's the bounty is a competition or maybe all of the submissions will get accepted. So for instance, the bounties for the ocean, I'm going to accept all submissions, right? Because I want more and more people to do it. But if I'm running a design competition or an art competition for something, I will say I'll accept the best 5, or I will accept the first 10, or whatever the situation may be, so that people can feel empowered to say, well, do I have time for this? Do I want to enter this and maybe not win?
Right. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. This is great.
Absolutely.
You're doing a lot of wonderful things. So just to let everyone know, our next webinar will be February 13th, where Joel Birch is going to talk about using community to build a sales funnel. And then on February 27th, we're going to talk about how blockchain is a social movement with Sandra Miller from Democracy Earth. Thanks everyone for attending today. Simona, you want to give your email and Telegram again in case people have questions?
Sure, yeah. It's just simona.pop@consensus.net, and Twitter is the easiest. It's just @sim_pop.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.